How to build awesome websites without code.
Hey, what's up Musers? This is John at Muse for You, here to help you build awesome websites without code. Hopefully you like that new intro video. It's all part of the new look and the new redesign of Muse for You. So I have a really exciting video tutorial today. We're going to be going over the new updates to the Staggered Animations widget found at museforyoushop.com. Now this widget is becoming one of my favorite widgets just because of all the things you can do with it and the different animation sequences that you can create with this widget. So here I have an example. We have a few squares rotating in a sequence and they're fading in as well. So one of the new updates with the Staggered Animations widget is the ability to change the opacity of an element as it animates in a sequence. So we're going to be recreating this effect here, and I'll be going over how to use the widget as well in this video tutorial. And we also have another example here, and this example I really like a lot. So basically we have kind of this dripping effect to this image, and basically what I did here was take different pieces of the image and just overlay it over the entire image, and I turned the different pieces into circles and just scaled them up with the Staggered Animations widget so it plays in a sequence. So it kind of looks like we have this interesting dripping effect to the elements on the image, and we're going to recreate this as well. For the pieces, I used the slice tool in Photoshop, and then I placed it into Muse and applied the Staggered Animations to those different pieces on the image. So it's a really cool effect. It almost looks like water drops or just something really fluid over the image. So I'll go ahead and get started on how to use the widget and the new updates. So here I'll go into Adobe Muse, and we have this website here and this site here. I'm gonna create a new site so we can build the website from the beginning. So I'll go to File, New Site, and I'll click OK. Then I'll double click on the home page, and this actually gives me the opportunity to go over the new update to the Advanced Gradients widget as well, where you can now apply the entire gradient to the entire page. I do want to apply a gradient to this page just for kind of an interesting effect to the web page. So here I'm going to go to the library panel. If you don't see the library panel, you can go to Window and click on Library. And here in the library panel here to the right, I'm going to type in Advanced. And here we have the two new widgets. We have Full Screen 2 Colors, where you can select from 2 colors for the gradient, or Advanced Gradients Full Screen, where you can go to the gradient generator and create your own gradient with more than 2 colors. I do go over how to use the Advanced Gradients widget in another tutorial, where you can take a look there and see how to use the gradient generator. For now, I'm going to select the Advanced Gradients Full Screen with 2 colors because I only need 2 colors for the gradient background. So here I'm going to click, hold, and drag and place onto my Adobe Muse website. And there we have it. So here are the widget options. We have the first color, the second color. The gradient angle is right up here. We have it set to 45. The scrolling option. If your website has a lot of height, you can set the scrolling so that the gradient extends the entire height of the page, or you can just have the gradient fit within the browser by not having scrolling checked. I like having the gradient fit within the browser because you can see more of the gradient. If it's stretched to the entire page, you might only see maybe one color at the top, and as you scroll down, the gradient starts changing color. So for now, I'll leave scrolling unchecked so we can have the entire gradient within the browser, and even if the user scrolls, the gradient won't change. So I'll preview that in the browser so we can take a look at the gradient, and then we have this nice gradient background. So I'm going to go ahead and apply a color to the web page because I'm going to create white rectangles on the web page, and because this is white, we wouldn't be able to see them. So I'll select any color here from the browser fill, and I'll select this blue color here. It doesn't affect the gradient. It'll still be that gradient color, as we can see there. Okay, so now I'll create a few squares to apply the animation to. So I'll go to the rectangle tool here to the left, and I'll create a 50 by 50 square. And then I'm going to give it a stroke of 1, and I'm going to set the stroke to white. And then for the fill, over here to the left, for the fill option, I'm going to set it to white. And then for the opacity, I'm going to set it to 50%, right in here, the opacity section. So now we have this 50 by 50 square with a white stroke and 50% opacity within the square, or 50% opacity fill. So here I'm going to hit Command C to copy and then Command V to paste. And I'm going to paste this a few times within the website. And I'll just copy this row here, paste it again. So I'm going to create a 5 by 5 grid. Okay, and there we go. So we have a 5 by 5 grid, and we have the elements that we want to animate or create a staggered sequence with. Okay, so now I'll bring in the Staggered Animations widget. So I'll go to the library panel, and here I'll type in STGRD. I abbreviated it for this widget because Staggered Animations is kind of a long name, so I decided to abbreviate it to STGRD. The first widget we want to add is the Add First. So here I'll click, hold, and drag and place onto my Adobe Muse website, and I'll bring the full screen down here just because I like having the Add First all the way at the top. And then the first widget we're going to work with is the Staggered Onload, so that the elements animate as soon as the website loads. So I'll click, hold, and drag and place onto my Adobe Muse website. Okay, so here we have the widget options in the Add First widget. We have instance number. Instance number is if you have multiple instances of a staggered animation sequence. So if you had, let's say, a few squares animating a certain way and you wanted another set of elements to animate a different way, then you would change the instance number for those animations. So each unique staggered animation would have a unique instance number. And here is the graphic style name that we want to apply to the elements that we want to animate. Here we can see it says animate 1, so we want to apply that graphic style name to all the elements on our website. So let's go ahead and do that. So here I'll select all the elements. You just want to select the elements that you want to animate, and then you want to go to the graphic styles panel. So here we have the graphic styles panel to the right. If you don't see the graphic styles panel, you can go to Window and click on graphic styles here. Okay, so with all the elements selected, you want to select all the elements, then go to the graphic styles panel, and then right down here we have this icon. So if you click on this icon, it creates a new graphic style, and then double click here on the graphic style and it'll open the graphic style dialog box. Here's where you'll want to rename the graphic style to animate 1, which is the graphic style that is in the graphic style name that is in the widget. So animate 1, I'll click enter, and now these elements will animate in a sequence with the Staggered Animations widget. So here I'll open up the widget options. We'll go to the options here. All right, so we have animation stagger delay. So this is the amount of time you want each element to wait before it starts animating. So in this case, it's 100 milliseconds, and 1000 milliseconds equals 1 second. So every 100 milliseconds, the elements will animate. So one will animate, and then 100 milliseconds will pass, and then the next one. So it'll be a fairly quick animation. Then we have animation duration, and this is how long you want each animation to last. So we'll have a bit of an overlap because the animation duration is 500 milliseconds and the staggered delay is 100 milliseconds. So each element will start every 100 milliseconds and the animation will last 500 milliseconds. So there'll be a bit of an overlap between all of the elements that are animating. Then we have elasticity. So elasticity is kind of like the bounciness of the element. You can choose between 0 and 1000. 1000 is like crazy bounce and elasticity. So the element will want to bounce a lot within the animation. And if you have a short animation duration and a large elasticity, you're going to kind of notice that the element goes a bit crazy because it's trying to really bounce within a short period of time. So here we have the direction as well. So you can say normal, reverse, or alternate. Reverse and alternate only work if loop is selected, and I'll showcase that as well. And then we have enable easing. This will supersede or kind of go over the elasticity. If this is selected, you can choose between all of these easing options and it will go over the elasticity. So this won't apply if an easing is selected. The only time it will apply is if you select ease in elastic, ease out elastic, or ease in out elastic. If you select any of the elastic easing, the elasticity will have an effect on how elastic it is. So if you choose any of these three and you set the elasticity to something larger, that easing will be more elastic or less elastic. Okay, and then here we have transform origin. So this is the location from where you want each element to animate from. So 50-50, picture like a coordinate graph. 50-50 is the center of the graph. 0, 0 is the top left. 100, 100 is the bottom right. If you say 0, 100, that's the bottom left. And if you say 100, 0, that is the top right. So just picture a coordinate graph, and from wherever the percentages are set, that's where the element is going to animate from. Okay, and then we have the different animations. So you can scale, translate, which is movement on the X and Y axis. You can rotate the element in degrees. You can set the opacity. This is new in the 1.1 version. So with this, you would first set the opacity in Adobe Muse like we did with these squares. We set it to 50%, and then you can select enable opacity, and the element will animate from 50% or 0.5 to 1, which is fully visible. 0 is not visible at all, and 1 is fully visible. So we're going to see the element animate or fade in as it staggers. So let's go ahead and preview that. So I'll go to File, Preview Page in Browser, and we can see it kind of has like this really interesting effect. It's almost like a printer effect where the elements are just fading in as it animates. So it goes from an opacity of 0.5 or 50% to 1 or 100%. Looks good. And there's also border radius and background color. So for the border radius, I can say enable border radius, and I can set 100, so the elements will become circles as they're animating. So we can see they become circles as they animate. Looks good. And you can also change the background color. So I'll say background color, and I'll say enable background color, and it'll change to this color here. So I'll preview that in the browser, and we can see it changes color and turns into a circle just like that. Looks good. All right, so let's play around with a few of the animation options. So let's say for the direction, I wanted it to go in reverse. I would select reverse here for direction, and I would want to make sure that loop is selected. So now the animation will play in reverse. As we can see there, looks good. We can also alternate the direction so it plays forward and then plays back. So let's go into the widget options, and for the direction, we'll say alternate. And I'll zoom out, and a file preview page in browser. So it plays forward and then plays backwards in reverse. So those are the direction options there. And let's see here, we can also enable easing. So if I have an enable easing checked and I choose an easing, like, let me zoom out here, we'll say ease out quint. We're gonna have a different easing to the different animations. So it just kind of has a different flow to it, or different easing to it. So I'll go back into the widget, and let's just add a few other animations just to work with them here. So for the scale, I'm gonna say 0 to 1, so it scales up. And for translate, I'm gonna move it 300 pixels on the x-axis and 300 pixels on the y-axis. So it's gonna move in a diagonal direction because it's moving on the right and on the x and the y-axis. So I'll say 300 and 300, and I'll zoom out here, preview page in browser. So we have this interesting effect here. Almost looks like rain or something, like something really interesting there. Kind of like that. All right, so let's say you wanted to go from the ending position to the starting position. What you would do there is move the elements first in Adobe Muse, similar to the opacity, where we set the opacity first in Adobe Muse, and then in the widget we change it. So let's say I wanted it to go from this position here back to the original position. What I would do here is set it to 655, so it's 300 more pixels to the right, because before it was at 355, and I know I want to move it 300 pixels, so I'll say 655, and then on the y-axis I'll say 362, so I'll add 300 pixels on the y-axis. And then in the widget, I'll go to the translate option, and I'll say -300, so you can add a negative value here. -300 and -300. I'm going to take the easing off here because I want to use the elasticity. And then for the direction, we'll leave it at alternate here. So it goes forward and then back. So I'll preview in the browser. So we can see it goes from that position back to the original position. So in case you wanted to go for that effect there. All right, looks good. And let's see here, we can work with a few more options. We can rotate the elements. So I'll say 360 for the rotation. And I'll take off the border radius, because if they're circles, you're not going to see the rotation. And I'll preview file, preview page in browser, and we can see they rotate in. Looks good. All right, so let me do something kind of crazy here. I'm going to set the elasticity to 1000, and we're going to notice something interesting here. So you can see the elements shake a bit because it's trying to fit 1000 or the maximum elasticity within a short period of time. So we can see it's kind of like shaking a bit because it's really elastic, but it only has a short amount of time to complete the animation. So it's kind of jittery. It's like, oh, I want to really bounce in there, but there's not enough time. So let's go back in here and let's add more animation stagger delay and more animation duration. So for the stagger delay, I'm going to say 500, and for the animation duration, I'm going to say 1000. So I'll go to file, preview page in browser, and we can see it's a little bit slower. Let me take off that large elasticity because it looks a little bit kind of jittery there, like it's too much elasticity. So I'm going to set it to 400 here. Okay, and I'll preview again, and there we have the animation's a bit slower because it's waiting 500 milliseconds between each animation, and the animation is lasting 1 second. So you can really have a lot of fun and get the timing just how you would like for your particular animation. All right, so I think I've gone over all the widget options. You can add play buttons. I'm not gonna go over that in this tutorial, but basically what you would do to add a play, pause, or restart button for the animation is that you would create the element or add the element and then assign the graphic style name play, pause, or restart to those elements, and those elements would control the animation. Okay, and then here we have a breakpoint, so you can disable the animation at a particular breakpoint. So when the breakpoint is less than the breakpoint here, the elements won't animate. So anything less than 48, then a 480 pixel breakpoint won't animate. So if you didn't want it to animate on mobile, you could just disable it at the mobile breakpoint that you have for your website. Here we have the how to use section. It's basically everything I just covered here in the how to use section, basically applying the graphic style name, the stagger delay, and how the elements will play. So the elements play from left to right, or if the elements are overlapping, they'll play from the bottommost layer to the topmost layer within the layers panel. And if you have the elements on top of another element, then it'll also play from within the layers panel from the bottom to the top layer. It'll only play from left to right if the elements are not overlapping, and if there's no other elements, if they're not within a larger scope of an element. And I'll actually showcase that when I go over the image with the circle scaling. So we'll go over that in a second as well. All right, so we went over all the widget options here. So now I'm going to showcase the on-scroll animations. So what I'm going to do here, because there is an on-scroll widget, so you can trigger the animation on scroll. So I'm just going to bring these elements down all the way here, and I'm going to add more scroll space to the website by dragging this tab down here. So I'm going to click, hold, and drag, actually this tab, here, to add more website space, and I'll set this to 1000 on the y-axis here. So we have to scroll to these elements here. Let me zoom in again here, and here I'll just delete the onload widget. I'll go back into the library panel, and I'll type in stgrd, and here I'll bring in the staggered animations on scroll. So here I'll click, hold, and drag and place onto my Adobe Muse website, and we have it here. I'll open up the widget options. Everything is the same except the on scroll option here. So we have this on scroll section. So here we can start the animation when it's fully in the viewport, which means it's fully in the browser, and we can stop the animation when it's fully out of the browser. I do recommend having these options just like this because it makes for a really easy animation. Once the element is in the viewport, it animates, and once it's out, it doesn't animate. You can have it animate when it's partially in the viewport and stop the animation when it's partially out of the viewport. It's a little awkward if it stops when it's not fully out of the viewport, because you might have the animation kind of all of a sudden stopping, which doesn't look great. So I do recommend having it stop when it's fully out of the viewport, so you don't see it stopping and when it's out of the viewport. And if you do have it partially entering the viewport, you can set an offset from the top. So when the animation comes from the elements come from the top of the browser down, and you can set an offset from when the element animates from the bottom to the top. You would want to enter in a negative value here, so the offset goes into the viewport. And I have a few references here. Okay, so here it says enter in a negative value to have the offset go into the viewport. Offsets work best when partially entering into viewport. Pause on exit does not work with play once or restart on entrance. So if you have the animation pausing on exit, then you would want to have these not checked. Play once and restart on entrance would not be checked there. All right, so let's see how this looks. So let's just add an animation to it. So we'll say, we'll set an opacity, we'll enable opacity, and we'll set the opacity to 1. Okay, so I'll go to File, Preview Page in Browser. I'll scroll down, and as we scroll to the element, it starts animating. I go out and come back in, it starts animating again. So it's set to restart every time it comes into the viewport. We can see it restarts, and it restarts from this top most element. So as we can see, if we come from the top to the bottom, doesn't animate yet, and then once the top reaches once the top of the first element comes into the viewport, it starts animating. All right, looks good. So we can have it pause on scroll. So I'll say here, pause on exit, or I meant, yeah, pause on exit, and I'll uncheck restart on entrance. And I'll preview. And if I scroll, we can see it starts. If I go off the viewport, it's paused right now. If I come back in, it finishes the animation. All right, looks good. And you can have it only play once. So I'll go back in here. I'll uncheck that and select play once. So I'll scroll, it plays. And then if I go back in, we can see it doesn't restart the animation. It just stays in the final or completed animation here. All right, so that is the on scroll option. It's all the same options as the onload widget, except you have this on scroll option where you can start the animation when it's fully in the viewport or partially in the viewport, and stop the animation when it's when it fully exits the viewport or partially exits the viewport, and you can have offsets. So here as an example, I'll set it to partially enter into viewport, and I'll set it -200 and -200. So once the element reaches 200 pixels from the top or the bottom of the browser, it'll start animating, and you do want to enter in a negative value so the offset goes into the viewport or into the browser. So I'll preview, so I'll scroll. We can see it hasn't started animating, and once it gets there, it starts animating. So it's 200 pixels from the bottom of the browser. And let's have it restart on scroll, restart on entrance. So I'll click there and I'll uncheck play once. So we'll scroll, doesn't start, and then it starts right there. So we have an offset of -200. And then from the bottom, we're scrolling. It doesn't start yet because it's using the topmost element. Once the top of the element, or the topmost element reaches 200 pixels from the top of the browser, it'll start animating just like that. Looks good. And I could set kind of bars here so we could see it, but just picture 200 pixels from the top and 200 pixels from the bottom. So you can have a lot of control of when your element starts animating on scroll. All right, looks good. So we've gone over the on scroll widget and the onload widget. So a few of the other widgets we have are the random onload and the random on scroll. So I'm just gonna go over the random onload so we can see how that looks. And then we'll go into creating that effect with the image where we use Photoshop and the Staggered Animations widget. So here I'm going to delete this widget, and I'm going to bring these elements back to the top. So I'll select them, and for the y-axis I'm just going to say 100 just to manually bring them back to the top there, so we have them right up here. And I'll bring in the staggered the Staggered Animations widget random on load. So here I'll click, hold, and drag, place right in there. So for the random, basically it's using a minimum value and a maximum value, and then it'll choose any value in between to animate each element. So for instance, if I go to rotate, we can set a rotate minimum value and we can set a rotate maximum value. So if I say 360 for the maximum value and we have 0 for the minimum, it'll choose various values in between 0 and 360 and it'll apply it to each element. So there we have it. So if I go to File, Preview Page, and Browser, we can see those elements are kind of rotating, but they're not all the same. And that's kind of fun if you want to go for that animation there. And I can even loop it and we'll add a bit more elasticity. So we'll have this really fun random animation. So we can see they all animate a bit differently. And let me set it to alternate so we can have it play forward and then play back. So let's add a random opacity to the element. So I'll click on opacity, click in here, click on enable opacity, and we have it set from 0 to 1. So for opacity and scale, it won't choose values in between 0 and 1. It'll be either 0 or 1. So some elements will disappear and some elements will appear. So I'll go to File, Preview Page, and Browser, and we can see some disappear and some appear. If we were to set it to, let's uncheck opacity, and we go to translate, we can set a value from 0 to 300 on the X axis, a minimum value for the X and a maximum for the X, and a minimum value for the Y and a maximum for the Y as well. So if we choose from 0 to 300 for the X, it'll pick values in between 0 and 300, so we'll have a random movement to each of the elements. So let's go to File, Preview Page, and Browser, and we can see they randomly end up in different places on the site there, or they move to different places. All right, so that's the random, and I'll go over the scale option just to showcase that. So scale works similar to opacity. So if we go to scale and we set a minimum value of 0, and let's say the maximum value is 2, some will be of scale of 2 and others will disappear, and a scale value of 0 means it's not visible or there's no size to the element, so you won't be able to see it. So I'll go to File, Preview Page, and Browser, and we can see some elements get larger and some disappear. So that's with the scale and opacity. It doesn't choose values in between those values. It either says minimum value or maximum value. All right, looks good. So the next thing we're going to go over, now that we've gone over all of the widget options for the onload, on scroll, and the random widgets, we're going to go ahead and recreate this effect here, where we have a few pieces of the element and then we have the image in the background. So let's go to Preview Page and Browser, and we have that nice kind of fluid effect. Kind of looks like raindrops onto the image. So we'll go ahead and recreate this. So I'm going to go to pixelbuddha.net, which is where I got this image, Pixel Buddha, and then in freebies, click on mockups. And then if you scroll down, it's on the second page, and it's right here. It's called, oh, it kind of jumped a little bit. It's called Web Project Presentation. You can click on it and you can click download. I've already downloaded it, so I have it here in my Finder. It's called scene.psd. So I'm going to double click, and here I'll click cancel. So the first thing I want to do with this image is set it to a perfect square. Right now the image is 4,000 pixels by 2,500 pixels in height, and I want it to be a perfect square. So when I slice the image, I'll have perfect squares as well. So to do that, I'm just going to go to image right up here, and for canvas size, I'll click there on canvas size, and for the width is 4,000 and the height is, I'll set it to 4,000 as well, and I'll click on OK. So now we have a perfect square for the image. So once I have a perfect square, I want to save the image in its entirety. So I'm going to go to File, and then I'm going to go to Export, Save for Web. And right now it's a bit large. It's too large. I don't want it to be 4,000 by 4,000 pixels in height. So I'm going to set it to 450 by 450. And I'll click on Save. So I'll select Save, and I'll find a new folder. I'll create a new folder for this instance. I'll just say image-2 here. You can save it as anything anywhere on your Finder or folder. And now I want to slice up the image into 100 different pieces. So to do that, I'm just going to go here to the left toolbar, select the Slice tool, and I want to select Slice Select tool, the last one here. So I'll zoom out, I'll click anywhere on the image, and then we have these two options here. We have Promote or Divide. So I'll click Divide, and then we have the Divide Slice dialog box up here. So you can divide horizontally into however many pieces you'd like. I have it set to 10 here, and you can divide vertically into however many pieces you'd like as well. So it's going to be 10 by 10, so we're going to have 100 different slices. So here I'll click OK, and now I'll go to File, Export, Export. Let me do that again. File, Export, Save for Web, and I'll zoom out here. Again, I want to set it to 450 by 450 right here in the image size, so it gets resized. And you want to make sure once you have all the slices here that you click, hold, and drag and select the entire image. And you want to make sure that there's like a yellow kind of orange line in between all of the slices, otherwise all of the slices won't get saved. So just click, hold, and select the entire image to select all the slices. And here click on Save, and then I'll create a new folder. I'll call this images 2, click on Create, and then I'll say 1. Whenever I'm working with a lot of slices, I like them to be numbered 1 through, let's say, 100, because if I do have different images, I can easily delete those images and replace them with another set of 100 images if I wanted to use a different image. And I might go over that in another tutorial. When you're working with a lot of slices, you can use the replace function in Adobe Muse. Just replace the images in that folder and then use the update assets in Adobe Muse to update the assets without having to re-add 100 different slices if you're working with slices or a lot of individual pieces for an image. So here I'll click on Save. Once I've set it to the file name 1, click on Save, and I'll go back into Muse here. And here I'm going to go to File, New Site, and I'll click OK. And I'll double click on the home page. So now we have the initial image and all the pieces. We're not going to use all 100 pieces, but I did want them to be that small for each individual piece. I wanted each individual piece to be, what would it be? It would be maybe 45 pixels by 45 pixels. So here I'll go back into here. We have the image 2 that we saved, which is right here. So here I'll click, hold, and drag, place into Adobe Muse. There we have the image. And I want to set the browser fill to the same color as this image. So I'll just click anywhere on the page. I'll go to browser fill here at the top. I'll select the sample color tool, and I'll sample this color here. So now the entire color of the site is the same as the image, and it looks like the image is just kind of floating within the site, which looks really nice. So the next thing I want to do is go into my Finder and go to the images 2 folder. It actually created another folder called images, and we'll view like this. And here we have all the individual pieces. So I'm going to select 10 pieces that I like and just apply them over this image here. So we'll start with the image of the car here. So here I'm going to place this image over the car image here. So I'm going to zoom in and just place it exactly here within the site, like that, until it snaps perfectly with the rest of the image there. And you can use the arrow keys and just align it perfectly, almost like fitting a puzzle over the image. So we have that piece there, and I'll find another one. I might only do a few here and then just fast forward to when I've finished adding all of the pieces. We'll add this one here, and I'll click, and that belongs over here, I believe. Oh, right up here. Let me zoom in, and there we go. I'll add this egg here. Okay. What's interesting, as you start adding more elements, they'll actually start snapping to other elements on the page, letting you know that you're on the right track. So this is snapping with this element I have here, letting me know that these are in alignment with each other, this image and this image. Okay, so I've added 10 pieces over this image. So if I right click and hide this image in the breakpoint, we can see these 10 pieces here. So now what I want to do is select these 10 pieces, and I want to change the border radius to 100. So with all of them selected, I'm going to go to the border radius option right up here and just corner all the borders and set it to 100. So they become perfect circles, just like that. And now I'll bring in the Staggered Animations widget. So I'll go to the library panel. I'll type in stgrd. I'll bring in the add first, click, hold, and drag, place right up here. And then I'll bring in the Staggered Animations Onload. So I'll click, hold, and drag and place here to the left as well. So the graphic style name is animate1. So I want to select all of these elements, then go to the graphic styles panel, and then I'll click on this icon here to create a new graphic style. I'll double click on style, go into the widget options, and I'll say animate1 because that's the name of the graphic style within the widget here. And for this animation, I want to set a scale of 0 to 1, and we're going to set an opacity as well. So I'll click on enable opacity, and we'll set the opacity to 1. And here in the images here in Adobe Muse, I'll set the opacity to 50%. All right, so they look good there, and let's see how that looks. So I'll go into my layers panel and just bring back that image by toggling the visibility. So we have that image in the background. So now I'll go to File, Preview Page, and Browser, and we have that really interesting effect where the elements are scaling in. And let me have it loop. So I'll set the looping option to loop, and we'll have the direction normal there. So go to File, Preview Page, and Browser, and we can see we have that really interesting effect to these elements. Some of these you'll need to adjust. As you can see, as it scales, it doesn't fit over the image perfectly. So you'll just go back into Adobe Muse, and I'll just move these ever so slightly. Okay, so I've just adjusted the smaller images a bit. So I'll go to File, Preview Page, and Browser, and we can see we have this nice, let me zoom in again, we have this nice animation where the image looks like it's popping out a bit. Looks really good. You could even add shadows to each of the smaller images. So let me just hide this here in the back. Here, I'll select all of these, and I'll select effects here at the top, and I'll say shadow. And now all of them have a shadow. So I'll bring them back in the image by toggling the visibility, and I'll preview in the browser. So we have the elements animating with the shadow. Looks pretty interesting. So you can have a really nice effect with this animation. If you notice, the elements, they're playing from the bottommost layer to the topmost layer within the layers panel. So here, so this element plays first, then this, and this element, then this element. So from the bottommost layer to the topmost layer in the layers panel. If I were to remove this image in the background, so I'm also going to set it to not loop so we can see it a bit better. And I'll go to File, Preview Page, and Browser. So it goes from left to right and also from top to bottom. So we notice this one animated, so it goes left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this one, it registered this one a little bit more to the left than this one, and then it went to the next, to the more bottom one here, and then it went down here and from left to right. If you did want to animate elements in a certain way, you could group them. So I could select these first 3, right click and group, then these 2, right click and group, and then these last 5 here, right click and group. So I'll preview. So we have these 3 play first, then these 2, and then these 5. So you can group elements to have them animate in a particular way. So it's just good to note that it plays from the left to the right and also from the top to the bottom. All right, so there we have the animation, and let me bring back the image. We're almost done with the tutorial. This is probably one of my longer tutorials. but there's a lot you can do with this widget, so I just wanted to go over the different aspects of it. Okay, so let me change a few of the widget options as well. Let me add here for the easing, I'll select enable easing, and we'll add a nice easing here. We'll say ease out quint, and we'll set it back, the staggered delay back to 100, and the duration back to 500. And we'll take a look. Preview page in browser. We have that nice animation there, and we'll have it loop, so I'll set the loop option here. And preview in the browser. There we have it. So we have this really cool popping image with different circles popping out of it. Very nice. And I'll take the shadow off because I kind of like it without the shadow. And I'll also ungroup all of these. So let me click on each one and ungroup because I kind of like that randomness to each of them. And I'll ungroup, and yeah, we're gonna take the shadow off. Go to effects and take off the shadow there. All right, so let's file preview page in browser, and there we go. They look kind of like water droplets, which is a really fun effect. So they are playing in random because that image is behind them. So that image is kind of bringing all of the smaller elements together, and they'll play from bottom to top within the layers panel. If there's nothing bringing those elements together, then they'll just play from left to right and top to bottom. All right, so that's it for the Staggered Animations widget. There was a lot of information in this tutorial. It's a really fun widget, and you can do a lot with it, with having, you know, different aspects of images pop out, or just animating certain elements in a sequence. The widget can be found at museforyoushop.com. And here you can click on subscribe now. And here you can click subscribe now to get access to all widgets and any new widgets I come out with for $39 a year. Or if you'd like to subscribe with PayPal, you can click here and subscribe with PayPal. The Staggered Animations widget is right down here. Here's the Staggered Animations, and here you can click add to cart to purchase individually, or again, you can get access to all widgets and any new widgets I come out with for $39 a year. Or if you'd like to subscribe with PayPal, you can click here and subscribe with PayPal as well. Here is the preview page. Here's an example I created with the Muse for You logo. We just have the elements coming in from the bottom right and creating the logo. Okay, and you can also play, replay, pause, play, and restart. And that's all done with applying those different graphic style names to different elements on your website. And you can use the image cursor to add the pointer to these different buttons here as well. So here I'll go back to shop, and here are the features included, a few of the widget options, and the changelog as well. Here's the first video on how to use the Staggered Animations widget. The new update does have quite a bit more. You know, there's a new on-scroll setup. You can animate opacity and set the elasticity or the easing for the animations. There's been performance improvements within the widget, and there's been the graphic style name added to the widget cover, so you can have a nice reference when using the widget on which graphic or on which elements that widget pertains to, simply by the name of the graphic style here. Here's the community section if you had any questions about the widget, and this video will be here as well in this section. All right, so that's it for this video tutorial on the new update to the Staggered Animations widget. It was fairly long, but hopefully you'll have some new ideas or get inspired with some of the things you can do on your Adobe Muse website with the Staggered Animations widget. So that's it for this video tutorial. Again, I do this to help you build awesome websites without code. If you like this video tutorial, you can subscribe below. Also in the show more section below are links to other resources and links to museforyoushop.com. So again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video tutorial. Thank you.
How to build awesome websites without code.